Hello class, this is the first video in the Anatomy of the Brain videos that I put together to help you prepare for the Anatomy of the Brain for your lab exam and the lecture exam. So what we're going to be looking at with this first video essentially are these big things. We're going to look at the external part of the brain and identify the cerebrum, the lobes, fissures, sulcus, and gyruses. So looking at this view, you see the cerebrum here. So this is the cerebrum of the external brain, and this is the right cerebral hemisphere. It's sitting down here within the cranial cavity. If we look at this view, here we have the entire brain, the upper part of the cerebrum. The cerebellum sits underneath it, like this model here. So again, the pink is the cerebrum. These are known as the cerebellum. And then we have the brainstem in here, which we'll take a look at in a little bit. But for now, let's go back to the cerebrum and let's identify the lobes. So the lobes, the portion of the cerebrum that we call the lobes, are named for the skull bone that they are found beneath. So if we look back here again, this portion of the brain is underneath the frontal bone of the skull. So this lobe is the frontal lobe. Good. What is the lobe that would be located in this region? The parietal lobe. What is the lobe that would be in the extreme back here underneath this bone? The occipital lobe. What lobe do we call the lobe that's located laterally on the side? And if we go to this model, it would be here. The temporal lobe. The fissures that we have, a fissure is a deep depression or a deep sulcus. Essentially, to distinguish between a gyrus and a sulcus, a gyrus is an elevation on the surface of the cerebrum. A sulcus is a depression or a wrinkle, like you see here. And a fissure is a deep sulcus. So what is the name of this long fissure that lies across the top of the brain, dividing it into the right and left cerebral hemispheres? This is the longitudinal fissure. The fissure in the back that separates the cerebellum from the occipital lobe, this is the transverse fissure. On the side of this model, this prominent sulcus has been marked in for you here. So this sulcus is the central sulcus. Now that is a major anatomical landmark. There's one on both sides, so one over here as well. But that is because that sulcus divides two major gyruses. So the gyrus that we find here, now this is in front of the central sulcus because this is the frontal lobe. The occipital lobe is back here. The cerebellum would be here, but it's been removed. You can see it here. So if this is in front of the central sulcus, it's actually this entire strip. What gyrus is this? That is the precentral gyrus. There is another gyrus behind it. Name this gyrus. Postcentral gyrus. Now, each one of these gyruses is an important functional area because the cerebrum is the executive suite of the nervous system, which means that this is the area of consciousness. So this is where we perceive sensations and initiate voluntary motor movement. So these areas of the cerebrum we have pretty well mapped and we know what they do. So they are referred to as functional areas. So this model actually has the functional areas drawn on it. There you go. And tells us a little bit about each one of the functional areas. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this video down. In the next video, video 2, we'll go over these functional areas of the cerebral cortex.